helping you find the right tax professional and avoid the latest scams. This is Taxpayer Beware, presented by the California Tax Education Council.
Not too many people know this, but California is actually one of the few states that set standards for tax preparers. By law, only attorneys, CPAs, enrolled agents, or those registered with our organization, CTEC, are considered legally qualified. But out of those 4 professionals, how do you know which one is right for you? Welcome to Season 4 of Tax Preparers' Legal Responsibilities to You. Today, we're chatting with 3 representatives to discuss the difference between these professionals and how they may or may not be the right fit for you. I think it's safe to say that for most of us, when it comes to filing our annual tax return, a CPA, enrolled agent, CTEC-registered tax preparer, or as we say, CRTP for short, will fit the bill. Tax attorneys definitely play a role in some situations, and we'll have our experts explain when that might be the case. Let's start with CPAs. Joining us is Jen Bogart from Cal CPA. Representing CRTPs is Fernando Angell, also a CTEC director. He currently hosts a Spanish version of our Taxpayer Beware podcast. To talk about enrolled agents is Tom O'Sabin from the National Association of Tax Professionals. He serves on the CTEC board as well. Welcome, everyone. So I'd like to first clarify, we're not here to say one professional is better than the other. Everyone here represents a group who can provide good and honest services. Sometimes it just really depends on comfort levels and the financial situation the tax preparer is dealing with. And that's what we're here to talk about today. So we'll start with Fernando. Can you briefly tell us about CRTPs?
Thank you, Ray, for having us here today. It's great to speak on this matter. When choosing a tax preparer, it varies, right? It's the right type of tax assistance that you need, right? There's guidelines to find that service, comparing to a CPA or a tax attorney. But for a CRTP, there's different things that you got to find out, right? First, you got to find out if they have the qualifications and the right certifications. For a tax preparer, you must be a CTEC-registered individual. You have to have a preparer tax identification pin. It's a P10 that is assigned by the IRS. And then also they got to have a bond. So this is one of the things that you should look into when you're looking for a tax preparer.
Awesome, Fernando. All right, Tom, any thoughts?
Sure. I've been an enrolled agent for more years than I would admit. And it's interesting. I came from the financial world. And in the financial world, there are lots of designations and licenses that you have to get before you can do anything with a client. So I come into the tax world and I discover that you could literally go out and buy software and start doing tax returns. So I sought out, what professional designation could I aspire to, from a standpoint of wanting to raise my professionalism. And it was the enrolled agent. I'm not a CPA. I don't have an accounting degree. So there's a lot more requirements in order to become a CPA. But I saw the enrolled agent as a way to show a minimum level of competency. And that's what I've maintained. Because I'll tell you, the tax-paying public, they have no idea that someone can just go and buy software and hold themselves out as a tax preparer. So I applaud California and a number of other states who've said, you know what, we're going to assign or require minimum levels of competency. But in that conversation, Ray, it doesn't say anything about honesty or the ability to work with a client. There's a lot of issues many times in the tax and accounting world where we're not the best communicators out there. And I think sometimes what a taxpayer should look for more than anything beyond minimum levels of competency is, can you have a conversation? Do you feel that not only is it a competent representation, but do you feel comfortable? And that comfort level can go from someone having no designation all the way to a tax attorney. And I think that's probably paramount, is that ability to work with and communicate with that client.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, finding somebody that you can trust is got to be a top priority. So I love that, Tom. Thank you so much. Jen, from a CPA's perspective, any thoughts?
Well, just a little bit of background on what those letters mean, what it means to have a CPA designation. That stands for Certified Public Accountant. And the process of getting that licensing, you have to have a 4-year degree, and then you also have to have 150 hours in certain accounting and tax related coursework. So for most people now, that means you need a 5th year of college or a master's degree. And once you've met the educational requirements, there's an exam. It's a 4-part, 14-hour exam that's fairly comprehensive, not just on tax and regulations, but also on financial accounting, on auditing, and on business and corporate management. So the scope of having the CPA license is broader than just preparation of tax return. And I think that that's a major designation or difference between the types of licensing we're talking about today. Because for tax purposes, a CPA can do basically exactly the same thing as the other tax professionals. It's just if you also need audited financial statements or are looking for other services, that's what the CPA license covers beyond the tax preparation side of things. So I totally agree with Tom's point that as to a working relationship, really what matters is communicating and whether your professional works in the way that you want to work. All that having a certain designation do is gives the taxpayer an initial first layer of comfort that this person has been screened somehow in a way that the taxpayer may not be qualified to evaluate themselves. So it says they've done something and met some certain standards to give that initial level of comfort that you can start with.
Well, I love that, Jen, and I appreciate you calling out the other professionals and really emphasizing the trust that's needed there. I had a question, just maybe for the group. Anyone feel free to step in. Since we don't have a tax attorney right on with us today, can any of you guys have any stories or times where you've had to maybe refer someone to a tax attorney, or maybe can give us an idea of when a tax attorney would be needed for someone?
Well, I have one thought on that, or a time that I've worked with them. I think that a lot of times attorneys have this similar privileges as CPAs and EAs and CRTPs in terms of, in California at least, being able to sign tax returns. And some of the ones that I work with are on the trust and estate side, and they have knowledge of tax. They've met background educational requirements, and they're also attorneys, so they're allowed to write the trust agreements and be involved in trust administration. But they also have tax knowledge, so they can then do the tax returns that go along with those. We see that a lot with 706s, which are taxable estates, where there's some very complex reporting that's going on. And if the attorney or the law firm has already drafted those documents and knows the background of the client and how assets are moving and money should be moving through the trusts, a lot of times that's a great choice for who should be preparing those returns, because it's not something that's easy to understand or to flow if you're not already part of the process of planning on that side.
I think if I could jump in on and add on to Jen's comments there, that's an outstanding comment, because I love the fact that, the person who drafted the trust is maybe best qualified to explain it, as opposed to, oftentimes when with our organization, people will call our research department and ask, how do I know what the trust should say? And I'll say, I think you ought to avail yourself of the attorney that drafted it. And then from a standpoint of enrolled agents, I can represent a client all the way up to tax court. If they're going to go to tax court, either have to be admitted to practice before tax court, or I think a CPA can practice before tax court. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. Yeah. But an enrolled agent can't unless they are admitted to practice before tax court, or you bring an attorney in. A specific situation that I had wasn't necessarily tax court, but I had someone that was approaching like a statute of limitations for collections. So I actually reached out to a tax attorney to make sure that I didn't make a mistake, that I somehow go to the IRS and say, hey, you need to stop collections. The statute of limitations has passed. I wanted that attorney to look at that situation with much more knowledge than I do about that specific issue and get, quote unquote, his blessing on, yeah, I didn't want to, as the saying goes, open up a can of worms and then say, oh, because you contacted us, guess what? You just extended the statute, and now we're going to pursue collection, which would be a really bad situation. So sometimes that level of confidence where you get beyond representation to where defense in a court setting, or I love your example, Jen, of the person who drafted that trust or is working with the estate being able to maybe not even prepare the returns, but advise on how that should be handled. I think that's an excellent comment.
Well, amazing. And I think that just, further we'll build the trust from our clients, right? That's why they're coming to us. And if we have the ability to refer them to another professional in our field that's going to better represent them based on their unique situation, I mean, all the better. And so those are some great examples. Really, really appreciate you guys chiming in there in regards to when we would work with each other or maybe even a tax attorney. So that's amazing. I wonder if you guys had any stories of clients that you guys have had to help because of either questionable tax preparers, or maybe someone helped them that wasn't a registered preparer, or maybe helped them with a situation that was way over their scope, and where you were able to kind of jump in and help them out.
Well, I always have tons of stories. I'm sorry don't want to monopolize the conversation, but I've run into a lot of what we refer to as ghost preparers over the years, the people that work out of their basement. They don't sign returns, and yet clients are willing, or they go to work with someone who says they know a lot about taxes. They work with them at another company. Oh, I do this on the side. That's not a full-time profession, but yet they're not willing to sign. I find that very interesting because I think it's important that the taxpayers understand, and you can see this today in the media with some high-profile cases. Ultimately, it is the taxpayer's responsibility what's on that return. They can say they received assistance from a preparer or whatever it might be, but ultimately when that return hits the service and the service wants to test it, it is the taxpayer who's responsible. So if you run into someone who's not willing to sign, or, people can sometimes be kind of gullible, and I don't mean to be critical of the taxpaying public, but listen, folks, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. If they say you can just go ahead and, this kind of business gets, this range of expenses just because you're in that kind of industry. I've heard those things. I've seen the non-signed returns. I've seen the trusts that are too good to be true that people are marketing those. But again, when you get right down to it, tracing it down to who did that, there's no trail, and the client should be suspicious. And again, they trust us and they think if there's an issue with the IRS, we'll represent them. So one of the early conversations would be, what's going to happen if I have outreach from the state or from the federal government? What are we going to do? What are you going to do for me? And I think that's an important conversation to have before you ever begin an engagement. I think that's so that kind of comprises a whole bunch of stories that I've dealt with over the number of years that I want to admit how many years I've been doing returns, but you run into that all the time. And the trusting nature of people sometimes surprises me. Now, granted, you don't want to go through life where you're suspicious of everything, but at least question, ask some questions. And again, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. So that's an important takeaway I'd have, kind of comprising 30 plus years of stories that have kind of melded into that one conclusion.
Yeah, I've seen countless examples of businesses or people, right, seeing advertisements or word of mouth, right, of someone promising maybe some type of refund, or in some cases, right, figuring out a way to lower someone's tax liability, right. Sometimes it is too good to be true, and the result or the punishment or the consequences, right, could be much more of an issue than maybe just getting that extra refund or something like that. So really, really appreciate that, Tom. Anybody else want to chime in?
I like to chime in, Ray. From our Spanish podcast, obviously we reached out another selective group, Spanish speaking folks that, really trust folks and the word of mouth that gets passed on. It's hard to believe that many clients have confidence in licensed professionals like your doctors, lawyers, and certified mechanics, right? But unfortunately, in many cases, they don't go to a licensed professional, a tax professional, because they were referred by a friend or a family member where they were told that, this individual can get you a lot of money, a refund. And that's what the bottom line is, right? A lot of the folks, they shop around, they go to these different tax offices that spring up every tax season, and they're looking for, who can give me the bigger refund. But unfortunately, these issues come up. For example, this individual that we helped out on the Ghost Prepare podcast, he came in with an issue where he went to a tax professional, unlicensed, obviously, because they didn't sign the tax form. We did some research when they came to our office for help. This individual couldn't be found. He tried months and months to try to get in contact with that individual because they started receiving the IRS letters and issues. And it was really difficult to see how gullible and didn't check the credentials before they actually went to this individual because they were told. It's important that individuals work with a CRTP or a CPA, or depending on their needs, and so our office has seen many of these cases where they've taken advantage, where they require cash. That's the number one rule, that when a tax office, you go in there and they require cash. They don't provide you a receipt, and then plus they invent all this other stuff in your tax return. Also, the other thing I think what we've experienced is direct refunds, right? Where they have them not deposited into their account. They have them deposited into some other account that they're not aware of. And then they shave off a little bit of the refund, and then they don't understand why their tax return refund did not match to what they received. So our office has seen a lot of those. But, the Ghost Prepare program that the CTEC has, it's really important, and hopefully that this can be broadcast to everyone, that you should, when you're getting your taxes done, they should be signed by that tax professional.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Can I add one piece in there too? Just from a slightly different perspective, I work with a lot of small business owners, and cost is a very important component, and I'm sure that we're going to get into talking about that too. But to some point, you're also getting what you pay for. And one of the concerns we see a lot are returns where the individual probably doesn't know that much about bookkeeping, has done their best, but maybe they're using QuickBooks and the balance sheet just makes no sense. They've got negative credit card balances, and nobody overpays their credit card by $50,000. Like, clearly the information's wrong. But if the taxpayer gives that to a preparer and says, this is my information, some people will just dump that into the return and prepare the return with that information, versus they would pay more to go to a preparer who actually looked at it and responded to them and said, hey, this doesn't look right. Either you need to work with your bookkeeper to fix these numbers, or I can help you fix them and you'll have to pay for the time, but your numbers will be right. And without the correct numbers going in, you're opening yourself up for big audit risk. And when somebody says, well, we'll prove these numbers that you're reporting as your tax deductions or your income, that's where you really see taxpayers having a big problem. And it's a lot more expensive when it gets to the point that you're under audit and trying to come up with support for what you're reporting on your tax returns, than taking the extra time and energy and sometimes cost to have all of that done correctly up front. But there are a lot of firms out there and a lot of preparers out there who, if the client comes in with the numbers, those are the numbers that we're running with, and we're not going to ask questions of that. So a lot of times where we have to do cleanup work, it's because the numbers have just been bad year over year. And it's especially for businesses because there's so many receipts and so much record keeping. So that's another thing that people should look out for is if they're working with somebody who can help them understand what it is they're reporting, because I don't remember whether it was Fernando or Tom who said, ultimately the responsibility for the numbers is with the taxpayer. So they need to trust the person they're working with to help them know what that responsibility is so they get the right numbers on their returns.
So, how many times have we heard trust? And a watch out, is it too good to be true? So I love everything that you guys had to say. I love to, now that we've given the audience a lot to think about when selecting a professional, also some watch outs, which I thought were great that you guys shared. So what do we do now, right? So when they're going out there to find a tax preparer that's going to meet their needs, what are some things that they should think about? What are some questions they should ask or consider? And Tom, any thoughts on that?
Sure, absolutely. I think just like anything else, when you have someone performing services for you, whether they're working on your house, working on your car, you want to know what it's going to cost, or at least a range of what the prices are. And I know sometimes you can't really, nail down what it's going to be until you get into what the complexity might be, but at least a range. And I think a lot of the complaints that we hear at our organization on a national basis really doesn't have to do with competency and sometimes it's not about fees, it's about communication. So if you say, well, here's what the average fee might be in our firm, then people know. An educated consumer is your best customer kind of approach. I would say there. So there's no surprises. I don't want to have a surprise when I take my car to be worked on and it's making this noise, and they say, well, here's what we think it might cost to repair it, and then it's up to me. I can say no, or I can say go ahead, or I can shop it. At least then you're in a position of, well, I hope this isn't too expensive, and you go in blindly. That kind of approach I think is bad in any kind of a setting. So ask questions, and any professional I think will not be taken aback by that, but they might just be able to give you a range, and that's an honest answer as well.
And I think transparency is really, really important. So if they're sitting down with someone and just asking some questions, and seems like the person isn't being really transparent, maybe that's a red flag to think about. And I also think, like you're right, and Jen said it earlier, the cheapest isn't always the best, right? And so it's really important, right, that not only feel like you're getting a good value, but you're also getting good representation and someone that you can trust. So I love that. Anything to add there, Jen?
Yeah, to emphasize the point on communication, knowing how your professional wants to work with you. Some returns are well suited for you to walk in and drop off your tax documents, and maybe your return will be done while you are sitting there in the office. A lot of firms these days are doing things electronically, primarily or exclusively. So you need to be comfortable with your computer and know how to upload things through their secure portal. And, that's especially great if you've got the kind of return where information's coming in over a period of time and you want to be uploading it as you receive it, but you're going to be waiting for a K-1 or some 1099s or something like that. But if you hate using computers, you don't want to be working with a firm that only accepts information digitally or doesn't have a good process for dealing with your paper documents. And similarly with meeting in person. So are you working with someone who likes to meet with all of their clients in person and is going to sit down with you and go over your tax return and explain it to you? Or is their procedure more you submit your documents, your return gets done, pushed out the door, and then if you want to meet, you do it in May or June or in November and December for year-end planning? And that's something that should be discussed up front. So what the professional's offering and how they run their practice, and you can decide if that's a good fit for what you're looking for. A tax practitioner, a CPA, or any other professional, we want to work with clients who are a good fit for how we like to run things, because then you're going to be a happier client and you're going to be getting what you want, and you're going to feel like we're giving you good value and we're going to feel like our time is being appreciated. And that's not a matter of competency or skill. It's just finding the person that works the same way that you want to work. And a lot of times people don't ask about that up front because they don't realize that there are different ways that people operate, and they maybe haven't thought about their preferences and whether they want to meet in person with their CPA or tax preparer, or whether they want to have a Zoom, or whether they never want to meet with them and they just want to send them emails and tell them when their returns are ready.
And I think that just gets at, for the taxpayer, don't be afraid to ask questions and or accept kind of what you're being told. Because if there's something that you really would like to see, right, out of your professional, whether that's you would like to meet quarterly, or right, you would like to work remotely and not have to go in and do any of those things, I think you should be able to ask if that's a service or something that they offer, and if not, maybe they're not a good fit for you. And so I love what you said there, and I love the plug in regards to like the secure portal. And I think it's a good reminder for everybody in regards to like sending documents over an email isn't necessarily secure.
It is not secure.
Or it is not secure. So you want to make sure that the professional you're working with does have a secure encrypted portal where you're going to be uploading or sending right, your sensitive information over. So it's just something, another great lookout, Jen. So thank you for sharing that.
Oh yeah, I think you just hit it on the nail, the head, where your personal information, protecting your information is critical, right? Because your privacy, your data, how do they protect it? I mean, if they're not using a web portal, they're asking you to send your information over via email. That's a red flag, because it goes to show that this individual that's preparing is not protecting your information. And nowadays, with your personal identifiable information being sold out there, with your social security number and dependents information, your address, I mean, that could be out there in the black web. And so I think it's important to know some important questions is like, are they registered and qualified, this individual that's doing my tax return? What type of experience do they have? Are they going to be able to help me with my tax situation? Like, for example, I went to another tax preparer. He put some stuff in there. What is it going to be when I bring it over here to you? Is like, what services are you offering? What are you charging for those services? I mean, like you said, Jen, you pay for what you get, right? And a lot of those costs include protecting my information. Are they going to be able to represent me during an audit, right? Do our CRTPs, they can't go to an audit, right? When I get a letter, what happens when there are errors in my tax return? So there's a lot of questions that you should reference. And I know that we talked about there's a CTEC website where we can provide some of those issues where you can resolve anything from filing a complaint with your preparer, providing, there's actions that are done per preparer also. And then also getting more information about if this individual is registered. So these are some of the things that you should do and to be able to protect yourself.
Awesome, Fernando. Jen, you had something you want to add?
Yeah, I just thought of one other thing that I think is really important is also thinking about what you need. And I think a lot of times tax is all grouped together in one universe, but the reality is, like, you wouldn't want the best heart surgeon in the world doing your cataract surgery because that's not what their expertise is. And the tax code is about this thick. It's enormous. And the tax laws recently have been changing almost every year. And it's a ton of information. So there are preparers that work with a lot of clients that maybe have international investments or interests and do a lot of international reporting. There are people, like, I work primarily with small businesses and their owners, and I am fantastic at that, but I don't touch complex trust and estates because that's a whole different area of laws and regulations that tell us what's allowed in that realm. If you have a bunch of rental properties and you need to file in more than one state, that's something that you need to know whether your preparer has the ability and more than just the ability, but the experience and has done it before to file in the different states that you need to file in. So before maybe you even see or start interviewing people, think about what needs to go onto your tax return, and then look for people who already work with a lot of clients that have those particular things on their returns. Or if you've got a lot of different pieces, moving parts on your returns, firms with any type of professional designation working at them, but who have multiple people who have experience in these different areas, so that if questions come up, there are experts available to provide feedback and get the right answer instead of looking for a generalist, because these days it's really almost impossible to be a true generalist in tax and know the answer and the correct reporting for everything that could possibly be going on your tax return.
I love the surgeon analogy. I think that was really spot on. And I think it's a great reminder, right? Any professional that is doing the right thing, they're going to actually ask you some of these questions, right? There's going to be an interview when you sit down as a new client, and they're going to want to learn about you and learn about your situation. If they don't, that's also a red flag, right? Because of what Jen and Tom and Fernando had mentioned, like, not everybody is just a generalist and can do everything. So I think it's important, one, if they're not asking you questions, for you to kind of drive the conversation and not be afraid to right? Ask about their expertise and how that will fit with your specific situation and maybe things that you're concerned about. So really, really great share. Thank you so much for chatting with us today. As always, you can find more tips on the CTEC website. Just visit ctec.org. We also have a lot more episodes where we chat with the IRS, FTB, Taxpayer Advocate, and the state enforcement for CTEC. You can download these episodes at taxpayerbeware.org, and a link to Fernando's Spanish version is on there as well. Thank you, everyone. I'm Ray Davis, and this has been Taxpayer Beware. We'll see you in the next episode.